welcome to the Soulful Business series. This is the second last interview of this series, and I'm with a man called Ewan Townhead, and he's based in Amsterdam from England, and he runs a business coaching other conscious entrepreneurs to realize their power as entrepreneurs and really make an impact as well as a profit. Now, I stumbled across Ewan recently thanks to my friend George Cow, and I started looking into Ewan's website, and what hit me straight away was the power behind his copy. His website copy is really, it really strikes me as someone who knows exactly what message they want to convey. So this man is a bit of an enigma to me. We've only just met, and I'm really looking forward to digging in with him today, digging into his psyche, his business psyche, and we'll see what we uncover. So welcome to the series, Ewan.
Thank you, Natalie. Looking forward to it.
All right, so I have a question, digging in deep straight away. What do you do that is different from other business coaches?
That's a very valid question. I'm not, to be really blunt, I'm not entirely sure, because I'm not entirely sure what other business coaches do.
Good answer.
I've experienced a little bit of business coaching myself, and I have friends that I talk to, but yeah, I'm not entirely sure what they do. I guess what I would imagine may be different is, I've definitely had while I term myself a business coach, I tend to go all over the map, as it were. That I'm really clear with my clients that firstly, there's nothing off the table. And indeed, actually, not only is it not off the table, but it's kind of like, no, let's go into the really deep stuff. Let's go into who you consider yourselves to be. What is in that exceptionally deep place that maybe you can hear if you get quiet enough. What is it that shows up in your relationships that then transmutes into strange relationships with the world also? So for me, I'm trying to encapsulate that in the brand, which is the realized entrepreneur, which is this idea that it's not compartmentalized anymore. It's not, I have my business over here so that I go home and spend time with my wife or husband, so that I go and meditate on the weekend or do yoga in the morning. It's, it's trying to look at the whole thing as one integrated expression. So I guess I would imagine that may be different to some business coaches, but I actually couldn't say for sure.
Well, I suspect certainly in my travels that it really is. It's part of this new paradigm that we'll speak about in business in this conversation. But I love that approach, because the more we compartmentalize our lives, the more we stagnate in our own growth, don't we? We can't actually realize our potential in our business or our personal life without integrating the two and looking at the patterns across the board. Is that sort of your take on it as well?
Yeah, I think it is. And it's definitely, I personally definitely find that line harder to find between life and work. It's not like I'm working all the time or something. No, there's, I try and in fact, I'm trying to make more conscious choices about, okay, this is work time, this is not work time. But it's all my work. The whole thing is my work, and the whole thing is my life. It's kind of like, to imagine that, work is something that enables me to then live. I think that's the old model. That's the old, I work hard so that I can party on the weekend, or I work hard so that I can retire at 65 and then have my life and do what I want to do. That time is definitely going fast.
absolutely. And I think often we're programmed to do it unconsciously, aren't we? To keep things separate and yeah,
Right.
stages of our life separate, and so many things. So it's
Right.
such a big part of conscious entrepreneurship, isn't it? Realizing the choices that we're making and why. So something that you speak of a lot on your website is about realizing your own power as an entrepreneur. So can you tell us what that means and why it's important?
Yeah, good question, Natalie. What does that mean? I think I'm still trying to work out exactly what that means. Um, Here's a quote which will speak to some of it, which is so there's a writer that my mentor put me onto who's called Peter Kastenbaum, and no one's ever heard of him, but he's amazing. He's this kind of philosophical genius who I think he was a philosophy professor, and then he kind of got into business and wrote books and has mentored business giants that we would have heard of. But he's kind of this obscure writer, and there's an amazing book that I'm still only halfway through it because it's kind of so meaty. But it's called The Inner Side of Greatness, and it's his take on the nature of leadership. And one of the quotes, which I think he's paraphrasing Plato, but I don't hold me to that. But anyway, he says leadership is the combination of power and wisdom. That power without wisdom is tyranny, and wisdom without power is vacuousness.
Love it.
So it's like this interplay between two very different sides of leadership. Of yes, one's ability to wield power is one that I think we're probably pretty afraid of in the more conscious culture, because we're conscious of the damage that's done in the past or has the potential to be done in the present. But on the other hand, I think probably our conscious culture, and I absolutely include myself in this, is the tendency is probably to sit more on the other side, which is to have a lot of wisdom and not necessarily wield power, and it can end up in a little more vacuousness, perhaps. So, in one sense, I think the issue of power is about tuning into kind of the latent energy of ambition and calling that we all have within us. It's not something that's manufactured or that we try and measure up to from some external standard. I think it's something inbuilt, but there is somehow there's a particular fear about it, I feel like, in the conscious culture. And I was listening to Fred Kaufman, who's a teacher that's had a huge influence on me. He wrote the book called Conscious Business, and I was listening to him. There's a Wisdom 2.0 video with him and Jeff Weiner, the CEO of LinkedIn, which is great. I highly encourage your listeners and viewers to go and watch that.
Right.
And that's one of the things that he says about Jeff, that he says in Fred's experience of having worked with top leaders from, all over the world, the top CEOs of the top companies, that Jeff was one of the few examples of somebody that he felt wielded power cleanly, and that was something that he didn't see very often, and that somehow seems symptomatic in some sense of the point that we're at right now, which is there's enormous amount of power available, there's enormous amount of corruption possible. How can we take up our own tool or weapon of power and use that in a genuinely clean way? Not, it's always the idea, isn't it, that no, I'll do it differently. If you give me the power, I won't be corrupted. I'll use it properly. And
yeah, of course. Yeah, so tell me, it's really insightful to talk about this, because I haven't actually talked about power in this series yet. And what I'd love to know myself, as well as for our viewers, is what is power actually, or what did you call it? You called it conscious power or true power, something like that. So a healthy version of power.
Right.
What does that actually look like in a practical sense in a business? How does that actually convey? How do we know? What are the signs of someone who's in their true power?
Excellent question. So what this is probably not going to be a complete answer, but what comes up is that it's something to do with like I get an image of kung fu for some reason coming up in my awareness. I used to practice kung fu, and in one sense that practice was about the practice of how to use power skillfully, both to attempt to strike an opponent and not be struck by an opponent, to defend oneself. And I also used to practice a lot of qigong, and so I've done a lot of energetic work. We could talk about subtle energy or chi or whatever you want to call it. I think the ability to conduct that kind of energy through our body, yoga, if you like, that's what comes up. I mean, in a sense, I think that's what power is. It's the ability to conduct energy through our bodies and through our beings. So how does one do that in a business? Well, indeed, I think one of the ways that I'm personally looking at that right now, or being challenged on that right now myself, is like there's a growing level of visibility that me and my work is getting, which I feel really ambivalent about. It's like, in one sense, that's what I want. I feel like I have a lot of things to say. I have a lot of things to do. And on the other hand, it's really uncomfortable for me to be. A part of me gets really uncomfortable, kind of being exposed and seen to the degree that is starting to happen. And it's like I'm realizing that okay, let's give you a really corny quote. It's Spider-Man. It's with great power comes great responsibility. And it's, as I become more visible, I think what I feel is I'm putting a lot of attention on anyway is the principle of integrity, which is I'm good with words. I could espouse a lot of stuff, which I could make sound very appealing and very persuasive, and perhaps I'm sure this is something we'll get onto, but I think that's one of the disconnects that we see, for example, in marketing, which is there's a lot of power available in marketing. If you go and read, Cialdini's book on persuasion or something like that, there's some tools and there's some approaches there which are enormously powerful. I've used them; they work, and it's possible to use very powerful tools in service of something that isn't necessarily as conscious as maybe possible. I've done that in the past. Maybe it's inevitable, but I think that's the immediate kind of, I guess, practical juncture that I see it playing out.
That's interesting. Power in marketing. The way, I guess my take on it is, we can use our personal power to manipulate or coerce, or we can use our personal power to empower,
right?
Awaken the power in another person. And we do that through being completely responsible, as you say, for our own power. And actually, as you were talking, I was reminded of an experience I had recently with a red belly black snake, which we have here in Australia. I was on a bushwalk and walked straight past this red belly black snake. It was literally, this close to my ankle. And for the people out there who don't know, red belly black snake is one of the top most venomous snakes in Australia. So I got off lucky. Anyway, when I realized it was there, I turned around, and this snake just it knew I was there, and it actually flattened its body and just stayed completely still. I sort of walked around it just to get a better look of it, and I was, I wasn't in striking distance, but I was reasonably close. And it was a moment where I actually realized that's what true power is. That this snake had the ability to strike at me, even though there may not have been any real threat, but it didn't. And we all possess that level of power inside of us, but if we don't know when or how to use it, that's when it becomes irresponsible. Right. So I don't know if that story strikes you, but I really got it,
Yeah, I like that, Natalie. It's what it sparks in me is it's like the actions that we're taking is the power that we're using, is that opening other people, or is it closing other people?
Yes, I love that. Yeah.
Is it opening their heart? Is it giving them access to more fullness of themselves and the human experience, or is that closing and contracting? And sometimes it could contract them initially so that they actually open in a larger sense later on. That's maybe where the practice gets a little trickier, but in the larger sense, I do think, I remember hearing my friend Lisa Fabriga saying that that's how she measures, truth speaking is a big part of her practice and her business. So really stepping into speaking her truth and helping her clients to speak truth. She said that, I'm pretty sure she said that's the safety check that she's measuring. Is this opening other people by this truth that I'm speaking, or is it closing them? Because sometimes we can speak our truth because we want to be able to say what we want to say, and actually it's more about us just getting stuff off our chest rather than serving and opening the people around us.
That's brilliant. I love it. And we can do that, in terms of marketing. We can do that in the words on a web page. We can do it in the spoken word. We can do it in conversation in so many ways, can't we? We can actually help people to access more of their own power through being connected with ours. So I'm curious to know, I know you've worked with entrepreneurs in a whole range of domains, right down from the solo entrepreneur right up to CEOs. So tell me, are the issues the same? Does it all come down to the same thing? A CEO who has a huge amount of power, to use at their disposal versus a solo entrepreneur. Is there any real difference, or is it the same lesson just on a different scale?
Well, just to say one thing. So I have worked with CEOs, but they tended to be CEOs of small companies, not necessarily huge. Well, it hasn't been, big multinationals. I haven't done that work. I may never do it. Is it the same issue? I'll get back to you in about 10 years on the definitive answer.
Just a work in progress answer will do. It's all good.
So again, it's like I probably tend to attract a certain kind of entrepreneur or business leader, and that's part of what I'm starting to teach increasingly, is that actually one of the practices is showing up as transparently as we're able, and then we kind of attract the people that are kind of naturally going to be well served by our particular shape or our particular type. So I probably tend to attract a certain type. What I'm seeing increasingly in people I'm working with is to reference back to what I was mentioning a few minutes ago, I think there's a consistent fear of being seen. I tend to work with people that have a lot of artistic gifts. They're often artistic entrepreneurs or creative entrepreneurs, with all kinds of different mediums, designers, writers, photographers. And there's something strange in the archetype of the artist, I think, which is that in one sense, I think, I was saying this to a woman yesterday, that in one sense, the great artists, I think, what they're really great at is getting out of the way so that the art can come through them. And yet, on the other hand, great artists often get a lot of visibility. So there's a kind of strange dynamic with artists I see where there's a huge urge to have their work come out into the world, and that's in fact that's what I'm writing about right now for my next post. I'm seeing that a lot, which is people are afraid to really put their true work out. And I think part of that is a fear of being seen. It's the whole vulnerability thing that, for example, Brené Brown speaks about so beautifully and eloquently. It's like when we put out our true work, when we put out the things that we really care about, that if we're a trust fund kid and could drink smoothies through a straw for 60 years, it's like, what would you get out of bed for? Well, I'd put this out there. But to put that out there is ridiculously vulnerable in my experience. And the amount of squirming and procrastinating and self-sabotage that will go on during that process is quite glorious. Yeah. So I do see that theme playing out a great deal. And then I'd say the other one I'm seeing playing out a lot right now is people wanting to market themselves and their work in a different way. I'm coming across a lot of people that do wonderful work, and they have some level of allergy to marketing, or at least the way that they think marketing should be practiced or needs to be practiced. And that's something I've been wrestling with myself for several years, and I think that landscape is changing too, and I've been writing more about that recently. But I think there's a growing number of people that I work with a lot, which is they're very creative. They're very much about work that makes a difference, that is here to serve, that's about a larger vision or a larger dream. There's a lot of idealism in them. And there's a resistance to marketing themselves somehow, like there's a resistance to be seen sometimes. But secondly, I think there's a resistance to persuasively manipulative marketing, to be blunt. And there's probably a piece around money, but that's a whole other thing.
Yeah. Yes. Money's another story, always. So you've said so many good things in there that I just want to follow one in particular around vulnerability. My experience with power, or my take on power, or the way I describe it is the ability to have an impact, to create something from nothing. And when you talked about vulnerability, I realized that vulnerability has huge impact.
Yes.
Doesn't it? True vulnerability. And so vulnerability is power. It's synonymous with power.
Right.
So how do we actually become more vulnerable in business? They seem like they couldn't be further apart, those two words or concepts.
Right. Yeah, great question, Natalie. I have a couple of things come up. So I think what I've found, and I'm seeing this more with the people I'm working with too, is that in one sense, I feel like when I'm working really well, one of the things I'm doing is I'm following the thread of a deeper movement, or I'm hearing a deeper call, and I'm in relationship with that. One of the posts I wrote was about it was called The Most Powerful Question I Know, and the question is just what is being asked of me. And it's this, I can't remember quite even how the question came, but it's that energy. It's okay, what am I being asked to do next? What's being called forth from me? And what I found is normally those things that are being asked aren't comfortable. They don't necessarily feel safe. They're pushing me beyond what's familiar for this kind of stage of being I may be at, and I'm having to step excuse me, having to step into things that are unknown. It's stepping into a place where I don't know what's going to happen, and I think that domain of the unknown, in one sense, that's actually where creativity resides. That is the domain of creativity. So Seth Godin would say, creativity comes from the tension between this might work and this might not work. So it's like you have, okay, this may not work, and there's this whole space in between where you don't know what's going to happen. For me, that is the domain of creativity, but it's also the domain of the unknown. And I know myself, and from the people I work with, that stepping into the domain of the unknown is really vulnerable, because you're going to find out things about yourself that are confronting, that are shocking, surprising, exhilarating, all across the spectrum. But you're going to become vulnerable to a new level of being of yourself, I think, ultimately. And so I'm thinking of the example of Brené Brown herself, and remembering her saying, that first TED video, the one that kind of made her really famous, she wasn't particularly well known before that. She had written books, but she wasn't the kind of global name that we know her to be now. And so the experiment was, well, let's see what happens if I talk about my research around vulnerability while actually being vulnerable myself, which is something that she, I think, stringently tried to avoid until that point. And she said, the result was completely shocking to her. She had no idea that video would go viral in the way that it did. It's been viewed over 20 million times, I think now. And she said, like, if I'd have known that it would have got that many million, there's no fucking way I would have done it. I don't want that kind of power. I don't want that kind of exposure. And so I think she's vulnerable. My reading would be that she's vulnerably following the calling of, okay, if I'm teaching vulnerability, let's role model that myself, and let's be vulnerable enough to try that experiment and see what happened. And so in one sense, I think vulnerability is following a deeper thread that's going to take us to places in the unknown that are uncomfortable. And it's also, I practice it a lot with my writing. So it's like it's sharing the things I really don't want to share with people, or it's saying the things that I'm afraid that people will judge me for, or unsubscribe from my list for, or badmouth me on Facebook for, or whatever it may be. And that's an ever deepening practice of how vulnerable I'm willing to get. Because I think what happens when you get vulnerable is you allow yourself to be seen and impacted by other people. And so it kind of, maybe it tags nicely with your definition of power, of the ability to impact, or maybe vulnerability is maybe that's the reverse, which is the ability to be impacted.
So, can you tell us what was the outcome of you being really vulnerable in some of your posts? What happened? Did your worst fears come true?
Not so far. Okay, let's choose one that I actually literally feel vulnerable about speaking about in this moment. Okay. So I wrote a piece about 3 weeks ago now that's called Confessing to My Friendship with Jesus.
Ooh.
That was a hard one for me to write. So I was brought up an atheist. My mum was basically a Marxist. In England, growing up, Christianity is the really old, dusty thing that our grandparents kind of did, and we don't need to do anymore.
Right.
Or it's the thing that the crazy Americans do in the South, where they, do all kinds of odd things. So, growing up, I had all kinds of prejudices, I would say, against Christianity and the figure of Jesus. And then the last couple of years, I've found myself. I remember the point when it happened. I was going through a really dark period, and I just felt this voice kind of saying, "Go and read some Christian stuff." And I was like, "What?" And I did, and I found something speaking to me through that spiritual lineage that I hadn't found in the Eastern stuff I'd read, or the more, especially the more Buddhist texts that I might have read. And I still can't quite explain what the difference is. I have some ideas, but there's something about that whole school which spoke to me deeply. So that was a hard piece to write, because I had to move through the vestiges of my own judgmentalism about people who say, Jesus is their friend. And I had to, I was worried that people, friends, that I know and family members would go, "Whoa, what happened to you?" And he just suddenly went wacko or something.
Yep.
Maybe they have thought that and they haven't told me yet. I don't know, but.
So what was the response?
It was beautiful. I got the whole heap of messages and emails, and the main thing that people said, which was one of the impetuses for writing it, actually. I was telling the story to a friend of mine, and he was an American guy who'd been brought up Christian, and he said, "Wow, Ewan, you've helped me kind of look at Jesus and Christianity in a different way just now over dinner. Like, this could help others too." And I was like, "Ooh, I think you got me there." So I wrote the piece, and indeed, that's some of the feedback I got coming back to me, which was, "Thank you for giving me more permission to own my faith in the Christian mystical tradition." Which is, there was a lot. It's basically, I discovered there was a lot of closet Christians knocking around that didn't necessarily parade it in the way that we might do with Buddhism or yoga or whatever it may be. And me kind of making my own confession helped them come out a little bit, I guess, also.
Yeah. Well, something that comes to mind is around tribe. This ability to connect with your tribe, the people who really, are on your wavelength, the people you're destined to serve, however you want to describe your tribe. That when you are vulnerable, you actually allow them to feel, you invite them into your world, you allow them to feel close to you. And I'm going to ask something really radical. How do you actually connect the dots between that, the vulnerability in connecting with your tribe, and profitability?
Excellent. Okay. So, excellent question. Okay. So for me, the whole purpose of the game, so the game is won for me when my work is fully given and the transformation that happens as a result is in motion, and it's gone beyond, and it's then gone beyond me, and it's gone beyond where I could even track my own influence. So essentially, while it's about me giving my own work to the world, it's also fundamentally about service. And in some way, those two are kind of in a polarity, because it's about my own creativity, which is not necessarily about other people, but then it is deeply about service. And so it's somehow about the interrelated dance between those two aspects. So intimacy and vulnerability and creating deep connection with the people that you're here to serve, I think it allows more service fundamentally. I think the more intimacy and trust that you can create with people, the more deeply they're going to give you permission to go and change them. I think where the money piece comes in is, I wrote a piece on money a couple of months ago, and it helped me pop some of my own dusty narratives around the nature of money. And what I got through writing that piece is, like, money doesn't really exist. It's an idea. You can't even really find it anywhere. It's like it's these dots on the pixels on the screen that says you have X number of thousand euros in your bank account, or it's the even, I don't know if it's like this in Australia, but in England on the banknotes it basically says, I owe the bearer of this note £20, signed the chief cashier. It's like, it's an IOU. It's
all an illusion.
right. You can't find it anywhere. So
Yep.
what money actually is it's a measurement device. It's a measurement, and it's an indicator of something else, which is essentially value. So money helps us to measure value so that we can exchange stuff more easily. So, we've been exchanging stuff for a long time before money existed. We exchanged goats for women so we could marry them. We exchanged tobacco for swords, all kinds of different stuff. We've been, swapping stuff so that we mutually benefit from it for a very, very, very long time. Money just kind of makes that easier. If you try and buy a book on Amazon in exchange for half a goat, it just gets a little cumbersome. So when we have money, you can swap stuff a lot more easily. So money is just about value. It's an indicator of value. And so for me to take it even a step further, I would say money is basically an indicator of service. So it's not necessarily a direct measurement. It's not like, if I do 3 units of service, I get 3 units of money, because that, there's an exchange and a complexity there, which doesn't quite work in that fashion. But I do think it's the case that, as I step out into the world and I deeply serve those that I feel like I'm here to serve, it will come back on me. And I guess there could be a trap in there, which is the kind of, there can be a secret law of attraction thing where it's like, I don't need to do anything to receive the money and people will simply give it to me. No, I do think there's an active component in that. I do think, no, let's charge prices that are high enough that we feel uncomfortable about, that really serve the people we're working with. There's a chronic low-priced disease going around the conscious community, but I'm very clear that money isn't about, it's not so that I can buy a shiny car or anything. No, it's an indicator of service. So that would be how it links up for me. Intimacy and vulnerability are going to give me deeper connection with the people I'm here to serve. As I serve them more deeply, money is going to be created on both sides. Value is created on both sides. We'll help each other. The world gets better, hopefully.
Yeah, I like that, actually. That money is created on both sides. So value is exchanged. So, as a coach, you give value and you also receive value. in other
Exactly.
forms than money as well. Money is just one of those
Right.
forms.
Totally.
Yeah, so it's an interesting one, and for me, it's kind of like it's that somehow the magic of the world or the universe that we live in. It all just works out, and we don't actually know how sometimes. And
Totally.
something that is unquantifiable, like being of service, somehow becomes quantifiable, and is different for every single person or every exchange, but it just works
Right.
if the intention is true.
Right.
Is that your experience?
More or less so far.
Yeah. Oh, good. We're on the same page there. Yeah, honestly, money's come up a few times in this series, and I could create a whole new series on money alone,
Right.
with
Right.
people like you, because it's something that I say is money is a story that we've been told, and
Yes.
we're at a point now where we're rewriting the story and
Yes.
realizing that if we make money wrong, or we make money something or anything, it becomes that.
Yes.
So all we have to do is actually, come into right relationship, whatever that is for each individual, and that's when it just
Yes.
works. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that's right on, Natalie, because indeed, if money's an idea, if it doesn't actually have a physical quality to it, then yeah, it's defined. It's defined by the stories that we tell about it, exactly like you said,
Mm.
and also exactly like you said. Yeah, I think there's some old narratives around money, which I think narratives are inevitable. I think it's when we confuse the narratives for the truth, that's when it can get a little messy.
Mm.
Um, so a couple of the narratives I discovered in myself. Um, one was I guess the Marxist narrative, which is money is basically the root of all evil, and we need to overthrow capitalism, and then everything's okay.
Yeah.
That was still buried. That was still buried in their work, and it's
Mm-hmm.
probably still buried in their work, and its
Mm-hmm.
way through me. And the other one was money is hard to find. I didn't grow up particularly wealthy, not unwealthy. We were kind of middle class. Um, but it was, yeah, I discovered that my narrative was money was hard to find, and surprisingly, that's how it seemed to manifest as something that was hard to find. So
Surprise.
what the the reality that I've experientially discovered and have had help from dear friends on this also is um, I was working through a lot of stress and anxiety around money, especially as I was setting up the coaching business that I've been working on the last year and a half, and it was new, and I was totally solo for the first time. I'd always collaborated with people before this, and I was hitting new levels of anxiety around it. And what I discovered is my stress around money went away, not when I thought I had enough of it, that I had enough clients booked in, or enough in the bank, or enough work lined up for the next X number of months. Actually, I discovered that the stress dissolved when I trusted in my capacity to create money when I wanted it.
Mm.
And that was the difference for me. That if money is an idea, if money is a story that we tell ourselves, if money is an indicator of service, well, how do I create it? Well, I go out and serve people. And so to illustrate, there's a story about John Lennon that a reporter comes up to him. Let me see if I can get this right. So a reporter comes up to him, and he's playing the guitar and singing. And the reporter says, "What are you doing, John?" And he says, "I'm buying my wife a swimming pool." And the guy goes, what the hell are you talking about? And he says, "Well, I create money by writing songs, and my wife wants a swimming pool, so I'm writing a song."
That's brilliant. That is actually gold, and it ties back to the original thing we talked about with power in business. It's the ability to create something from nothing. So if you
Right.
decide that you want to create money, if you decide that you want
Right.
to create a tribe or create a business from scratch, you have the power to
Yes.
do that. You
Right.
absolutely do. Every person does if that's their desire. And we can all create money at will, can't we? It's a practice.
I'm definitely still practicing it, but it's yeah, it's bearing that out. There's always a there's always a difference, I think, between having the insight and then embedding that practice in a really stabilized, embodied way. But I'm definitely getting there.
Yes, that one never stops. I think it's something that will right. Be evolving for some time in each of us, and as conscious entrepreneurs, we are really paving the way forward with this new relationship with money and with power. In our society, money is power. So how do we rewrite that story?
Totally. Yep.
Again, another whole interview in itself. So, Ewan, we're just almost out of time. I wanted to ask you.
Oh no!
I know. We're just getting going, and and I'm wrapping you up. I'm so sorry, but maybe there'll be a part 2.
Cool.
So I want to ask you, what is your number one advice for someone who's a conscious person just starting out in business or reinventing their existing business? Having been there yourself several times, created lots of amazing ventures in your life so far, what is that gem for you to pass on?
It's launched before you're ready.
Cool.
There's a quote by Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, and I'll probably butcher it. It's something like, if you don't feel embarrassed by the first version of your product, then you launch too late.
Great. I love it. I love it.
I think
it's that vulnerability factor again.
Exactly. Embarrassed. Yeah. I have to feel the vulnerability of feeling embarrassed by the shitty thing I just put out there. It's Derek Sivers said, launch quick and crappy. I'm okay. Confession time again. I'm wrestling with this one right now. I've made a commitment to myself and kind of men's mastermind group I'm in, that I'm going to put together a group program. I've been wanting to do that for a long time, and I'm procrastinating like a motherfucker on it. What I've discovered is there's always an awful lot of reasons why we don't want to put it out there. Stephen Pressfield would call it the physics of resistance. When we try and create something that doesn't exist, we resist it. And resistance will show up in any form it needs to stop us in our tracks.
Yep.
And the practice is in launching before you're ready, because for me, the exciting place that we're at with business now is that the creativity, in a sense, happens, I think, like this. We feel deep inside ourselves. We find the place of essence, what we think we're here to do and what we're here to say, and then we try and say it, and then our tribe or the world will interact with that in some way, and it will respond, and it will open or it will close. And it's in that dance, it's in that interaction between the saying and the listening, or the teaching and the responding, that the work is created. It's not like we discover the work, we give it, and then people like it. It's a genuine co-creation, and that word is horrifically overused, but I do think it's a co-creative process. And it's, in one sense, it's Trungpa Rinpoche said, be yourself and the world will give you feedback. So it's kind of in that it's be yourself, be your work, and the world and your tribe will give you feedback, and it will evolve, and it will change, as you do that. So the sooner you can actually share it and have people respond, the sooner that actual creative process happens. We think that creativity happens behind closed doors. It actually doesn't. It happens in the interaction
Yes.
with the unknown. So launch before you're ready. If feel embarrassed about it, you know, I heard someone talking about it on a podcast, and he was like, look, you don't need an email list for this. You have a thing called Facebook. All you need to do is
Absolutely.
you could literally go there right now and say, hey everybody, there's this thing I'm thinking about doing. Are you interested? Send me a message. I could do that right now, couldn't I, with my group program? But that's maybe I should do that. It's
before you're ready, Ewan. Before you're ready.
it definitely feels before I'm ready. I do think we needed some level of clarity. It's not like you can just do a dump and expect people to pick out the pieces from between all the chaff. But I would say that the massive tendency in people is to wait way too long.
It's a sensitive balance with timing, isn't it? Yep.
Yeah.
Good advice. Thank you. So how can people connect with you if they're resonating with your message today? What's the best way for them to find you?
So just go to the website, www.therealizedentrepreneur.com, which is a very long URL. I apologize.
I'll put it at the bottom of the screen. It's all good. It'll come up on the screen. Don't worry about it.
There's a bunch of stuff on there. There's blogs is the main way I'm kind of interacting with my people right now. So I write every week. There's a bunch of blogs up there. There's a few podcasts which I kind of put on the back burner, but I'm thinking about picking that one back up. And then it's got other information about me as well.
Great. And Ewan his blogs are really worth checking out. He's an amazing writer, so I highly recommend joining his tribe. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Ewan. You've been very enlightening and a deep exploration for us today. I really enjoyed talking with you, and I feel like we could keep going. And I say
Totally.
that at the end of every interview, because every person just wows me with, the ability to delve into the subject of soulful business. It has so many offshoots. So I really appreciate your insights, and wish you all the best over there in your
Thank you, Natalie. It's been an absolute pleasure.